Weekly magazine that bore a rather startling title, "Did Christianity Cause the Crash?" I know a lot of people in the secular media want to blame Christianity for almost everything, but I thought this was a little bit much. It soon became clear, though, the culprit in the mind of the author was the so-called prosperity gospel. The view that's propagated by a lot of people today that if you follow God's will, follow God's command, great things will happen to you in the material sense of the term. And the argument was that a lot of Christians who believed this gospel were making bad and risky investments. And this led to the collapse of the housing market and the collapse of the economy and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know how seriously I take that particular argument, but I must say my interest was piqued in this phenomenon of the prosperity gospel. The roots of it, at least in America, probably go back to Oral Roberts, the famous evangelist who just died. Oral Roberts said to his many listeners, expect a miracle. Trust in God, and great things will happen at the material level of your life. Probably the most prominent prosperity gospeler today is Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen, who is the pastor of the biggest church in America, who has millions of readers and listeners of books and radio broadcasts. He also was a former student at Oral Roberts University, where he probably picked up his theology. But Joel Osteen pretty much announces the same gospel. Don't settle for a mediocre life. Trust in God's promises, follow God's will, and you can expect more money, a better house, a family you can be proud of, all kinds of material benefits. Now, to give the prosperity gospelers their due, there is a biblical warrant from this point of view. Look in the book of Deuteronomy. You'll find over and over again this promise. You follow God's commands, you will prosper. You don't follow God's commands, you will suffer. And you find that, again, reiterated often in the book of Deuteronomy. If you look in the Psalms, you find similar things, like trusting in the Lord and expecting great benefits. Jesus himself says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and the rest, meaning presumably wealth and clothing and food and the things you need, the rest will be given unto you. And he speaks even of the birds of the air, that neither reap nor sow, but God cares for them. And certainly throughout the Bible, Old Testament and New, we hear the command to trust in God's great providence. Okay, but we have to be careful at this point, I think, because the Bible itself nuances and specifies this claim of the book of Deuteronomy. The great counterweight, the counterpoise to the book of Deuteronomy is the book of Job. And what do we hear in the book of Job? We hear about a man who is perfectly righteous, who follows the commands of the Lord, who follows the commands of the book of Deuteronomy, who does what God wants, and yet massively suffers. In one fell swoop, Job loses everyone and everything he holds dear. Loses his family, loses his livelihood, loses all his wealth, loses even his health. His friends come and they commiserate with him, and they sit in silence for 7 days, and that was a pretty good move. But then they open their mouths. And what comes out is a kind of a typical, standard Deuteronomy reading of things. Job, you must have done something wrong. To be suffering in this way, you must have offended God in some way. But Job knows he's righteous, and we know he's righteous. We are reading the book. And so Job protests against this. What do we hear in God's great speech? Read it in the 38th, 39th, and 40th chapters of the book of Job. We hear not a standard Deuteronomy reading of like, yes, Job, you did offend me in some ways. Rather, Job's suffering is placed in the context of God's unfathomable, permissive will. There isn't a strict correspondence between Job's suffering and Job's virtue, or lack thereof. There's a cautioning, I think, of the Deuteronomistic point of view. Well, how do we solve this problem? This dilemma, maybe within the Bible itself? I think we solve it by looking at prosperity, not from our perspective, but from God's. It is true, I would say, that following God's will leads to prosperity, but not necessarily in a worldly sense. Following God's will rightly orders the soul. It rightly orders me toward my proper end and makes my life, in the spiritual sense, joyful. That is the prosperity I can infallibly expect from following God's command. Not necessarily prosperity in this world. In many ways, the book of Job is meant to caution us lest we move in that direction. I'll give you a good example of this. St. Thomas More, one of my heroes. Thomas More was a very prominent figure, important political